The bus rumbled into Hollow Creek, a town seemingly untouched by time. The buildings stood as silent sentinels, their facades whispering stories of a bygone era. Except it wasn't time that had touched it, but something else. Something off. The air felt thick with secrets, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Victorian mansions with gargoyle-laden eaves loomed over chrome and glass office buildings. The juxtaposition was jarring, a clash of eras that felt almost intentional. A Gothic church stood beside a neon-lit convenience store, the sacred and the profane, side by side, as if mocking each other. The discordant architecture was unsettling, a visual representation of an underlying unease. It was as if the town was a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. A visual representation of an underlying unease. The streets were eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're being watched. I stepped off the bus, my shoes crunching on the gravel. The sounds seemed to echo, amplifying the emptiness around me. My stomach churning with a nameless dread. It was a feeling that gnawed at me, a sense that something was fundamentally wrong. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of honeysuckle and something metallic, like blood rusting. It was a smell that seemed to cling to my skin. My gaze darted around, taking in the unsettling tableau. Every corner seemed to hide a shadow, every window a pair of unseen eyes. This was Hollow Creek, where my friend Bryce had moved 6 months ago, a place that seemed to exist outside the normal flow of time. He had been evasive about his reasons, his messages cryptic and filled with a sense of urgency that was hard to ignore. His emails short and strange. They were filled with half-formed thoughts and unfinished sentences, as if he was constantly looking over his shoulder. But his latest message had been frantic, pleading for me to visit. It was a cry for help that I couldn't ignore. He needed my help, he said. There was something he had to show me, something that couldn't be explained in words. Now, standing in the heart of this strange town, I felt a chill run down my spine. The weight of the unknown pressed heavily on my shoulders. I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. The sense of foreboding was almost palpable, a dark cloud hanging over me. The silence was broken only by the chirping of unseen insects, and the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the distant hum of machinery. It was a low, constant drone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It was a silence that screamed, a silence that felt pregnant with unseen menace. It was as if the town itself was waiting for something. A silence that felt pregnant with unseen menace. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow seemed to move. Taking a deep breath, I hoisted my backpack and started towards the heart of town, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Each step felt like a journey into the unknown, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew I had to find Bryce and uncover the truth behind Hollow Creek. Bryce's house was a jarring counterpoint to the town's unsettling beauty. It was as if someone had dropped a piece of the future into the past, and it didn't quite fit. A modern, minimalist structure, all sharp angles and glass walls, it looked like it belonged in a magazine rather than in this quaint historical town. It stood like an alien intruder amidst the Victorian grandeur, a stark contrast that was impossible to ignore. He greeted me with a hug that was too tight, almost desperate, as if he was clinging to me for some kind of reassurance. His smile was strained, his eyes bloodshot, betraying a lack of sleep or perhaps something more troubling. "You came!" he breathed, relief and something else, something I couldn't quite identify, flickering across his face. It was a mix of emotions, a cocktail of relief, fear, and something darker that I couldn't quite place. Inside, the house was sterile, devoid of personality. It felt more like a showroom than a home. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant, almost as if someone was trying to scrub away something unpleasant. The only decorations were a series of abstract paintings that seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy, adding to the eerie atmosphere. "So what is it, Bryce?" I asked, my voice echoing in the sterile space, amplifying the tension in the room. "Your email, it sounded urgent," I continued, trying to get to the heart of the matter. He hesitated, his gaze darting around the room as if expecting to find someone lurking in the shadows, adding to my growing unease. "It's complicated," he finally said, his voice a strained whisper that sent chills down my spine. "This town, it's not what it seems," he added, his words hanging in the air like a dark cloud. His words did little to ease my growing unease. In fact, they only made me more anxious. The entire town felt like a nightmare, a grotesque parody of normalcy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Nightfall brought a new wave of terror. Shadows stretched and contorted, transforming familiar objects into monstrous shapes. From my room in Bryce's house, I saw them. Cloaked figures moving through the streets, carrying stretchers draped in white sheets. Something about the way they moved, swift and silent, sent chills crawling down my spine. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside my window sent my heart racing. Bryce was no comfort. He paced his room, muttering to himself, his eyes wide and haunted. One night, I caught him staring at a photograph, his face contorted in a mixture of grief and terror. It was a picture of a young woman, her eyes bright, her smile infectious. Before I could ask, he snatched the photo away, his own face a mask of fear. "Don't ask," he hissed, his voice raw. "Don't ever ask." My every instinct screamed at me to flee. This town, this friend, it was all wrong. But something held me captive. A morbid curiosity, a desire to unravel the mystery that clung to Hollow Creek like a shroud. My search for answers led me to the town library, a dusty, labyrinthine building that smelled of decay and forgotten things. Amongst the crumbling books and yellowed newspapers, I found a hidden room, its walls plastered with newspaper clippings and photographs. They told a story of disappearances, of strange experiments, of a powerful corporation that had built Hollow Creek on a foundation of secrets. Then I saw her, the woman from Bryce's photo. But in this photo she was chained, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream. The caption below read, "Meredith, Subject 0. Suddenly I understood. Hollow Creek wasn't just a town with a dark secret, it was a prison, a gilded cage for something far more sinister. He whispered, his voice hollow. They control everything, even stronger. Her eyes blazed with defiance, her chains shattered. She was no longer a victim, but a warrior, ready to reclaim us, to question what we accept as truth, and to seek our own path to freedom. The events at Hollow Creek continue to haunt me. The unsettling architecture, the eerie silence, but the ones that hide in plain sight, waiting to drag us into their own twisted versions of reality.